after her divorce from her first husband, Lynn struggled with dating, especially online. She did something about it, though. She researched and she went to many different coaches looking for the answer. And she struggled even further because of the advice she followed. But she was smart. She knew to keep going and not give up. She found my material. It rang true with her. She listened to every episode of Make Him Wonder. She said, binge listened, and she discovered what she needed to tweak and to do, to think and to feel differently that would make a huge difference in her dating life. She did. She is now married. We talk about her journey and so much more in this episode. We talk about what it is to raise daughters in this time of struggle of young men and women, and I think you will really get a lot out of it by listening to this Wonder Woman, Robin, because you are a Wonder Woman and you are here, so I trust you will enjoy this journey of Robin's learning and leveling up to get the complete commitment she desired and deserved, and you can too. So let's get right to this episode with Robin.
I feel like you've gotten me unstuck. I really needed that framework for going forward, and I feel like you gave that to me.
Whatever I've been doing hasn't been working. Might as well try a different strategy. Thanks to you, Paula. I'm glad I found you.
Thank you so much, Paula. I really do truly appreciate you. This was awesome.
Sick of sacrificing or settling in your romantic life? Welcome to Make Him Wonder with Coach Paula Grooms, where women struggling in real relationships ask the expert. Unscripted, unfiltered, understandable coaching conversations to help passionate women succeed in love.
Hi there, and welcome to Make Him Wonder. I'm your host, Coach Paula, a dating and relationship coach for women, licensed social worker and author of the book, Why Won't He Commit? How a Man Decides to Make You the One. I help you find a Mr. Right, get an ex back, or grow an existing relationship with a man you truly desire, so you create the relationship of your dreams and level up to the complete commitment you totally deserve.
My guest today is 57-year-old Robin, who recently married 55-year-old Jack. Robin states that after a divorce from her first husband, she made mistakes like dating a separated man and many a consumer from online dating. In her search for answers as to why things were so challenging, she found the rules and started doing them 100%. But after going on over 100 dinner dates, she discovered my work and began taking more of an 80-20 approach. This proved to be a game changer, and now Robin is in a happy and fulfilling marriage with a man she truly desired. Robin now recommends my One Love online dating self-help course, as she says it would have helped her not waste as much time and effort in the first years after her divorce. Robin comes on Make Him Wonder today to catch up with me and ask about simple, sexy mother ways to deal with her and Jack's different spending priorities, including house repairs, decorating, family vacations, etc. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Paula. I'm just so grateful to you and for the opportunity to share my story with the listeners.
That's so nice of you. I thank you for doing this, because so many times once women get their happy ending, I don't hear from them again. So it's really nice to talk to you today and to hear how things kind of went down and what your journey has been like.
I'm excited to share it. Thank you.
Yes. You met him from online, or how did you meet Jack?
Well, I did meet him on Bumble, which I know you're not the biggest fan of. I knew about your work, but luckily for me, actually I had picked up the rules book back in the day before I married my first husband. So I was somewhat familiar with some of that, and I had worked with a couple of dating coaches and knew at a minimum that a phone call would be a good idea. So we did have a phone call, which went well. And then I made one of my first mistakes that you that you often outline for your listeners, which is that I agreed to a dinner with Jack, and I had gone on many other dinner dates, of course, not knowing any better. So we met for dinner. There was definitely some interest in chemistry, and it wasn't a super long dinner. Never was for me. I tried to keep it well under 2 hours. And then from there, he did call, and try to line up some other dates, which he did do, and we dated for a number of weeks. At that time, I was also dating a separated man, and I should say that Jack was recently divorced, so maybe only a few months divorced, maybe just under a year. And I was dating a separated man too, and I was just head over heels for this separated man. And I knew deep down that it wasn't a good idea, but he was the shiny penny. He sort of had everything going for him. He was the 0.00005 statistic that you talk about. You know, he was super tall and successful and charming and all the things, whereas Jack was, you know, just an inch taller than me and, you know, a lovely man and successful in his own right. But for whatever reason, I was just gravitating towards the separated man, probably because of my programming and because he was a little bit out of reach and not clear on, of course, what he wanted. So at any rate, I was dating the both of them, of course, not sleeping with either one of them, but dating the both. And at some point, the separated man figured that I was dating other people, and he asked to be exclusive with me. I understand now that it was really more just sort of sexual exclusivity because he just didn't want to be concerned about who else I was with. And so I went back to Jack and I said that, you know, I'm sorry, there was somebody I met just around the time I met you, and I'm going to see where that goes. And he was really disappointed, but of course he let me go. And then I proceeded to date the separated man for a number of months. And as you can imagine, that just unraveled and fell apart. And so he wasn't ready. And at the time, I hadn't read your book yet. He had been married before, but he was definitely in a consumer phase, just post very long marriage, 25-year marriage. And so we broke up, and then I sent a text to Jack and said, hey, you know, I'm single again. I don't suppose, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I let him know I was single again, and he was happy to hear from me. We got together, but then I found out that he was dating somebody else and that they had been dating for a number of weeks. And he's kind of a loyal guy, so he and I went out a couple times, but he just said, you know, I think I really owe it to this other woman to sort of see things out with her. So I was crushed because deep down I knew that he was really probably such a good fit for me. And so anyway, so we went our separate ways, and about 3 years went by. And I dated many, many, many men because I still hadn't found your work. And so I dated lots of men and a couple of short-term things, actually one thing that lasted over 2 years. And I think I reached out to Jack at one time during the time that I hadn't seen him. I reached out to him and I said, you know, it was during COVID, and I'd been in an area where his family had a property, and that was probably under financial duress during the pandemic. So I sent him a quick text saying, hey, thinking about you. I'm sure these are tough times for your family given, you know, the difficult economy and all that. And he was very kind, and he responded right away. And I kind of knew that I really shouldn't have reached out to him, so I just ducked out of the texting conversation after that and didn't reach out to him again. Of course, in hindsight, I'm sure that's not something you would necessarily recommend. But then on my birthday, about 3 years after he and I had dated, I got a text from him, and, you know, just a happy birthday text. You're still in my phone, and your birthday popped up, and I was thinking about you. And I'd just broken up with my boyfriend at the time, and my heart just leapt into my chest because I was so excited to hear from him. But I waited about 8 hours to text him back, and then I did, and then we agreed to have it was still COVID, and we agreed to have like a video chat. And then from there, he started asking me out. And, you know, in hindsight, Paula, I realized that it was so much better to be dating him at this time because he had gone through a 2.5-year relationship. She ended it. And he knew for a lot of reasons it wasn't right. And now he's post-divorce going on 4 years, and he has 2 children. So I know that that's just from your book and just from my experience with dating separated men and men that are recently divorced, that the more time they have away from that divorce, the better. So, so we started dating, and things progressed, and there's a lot more there. So we continued dating, and early on in the dating, he asked me if I wanted to get married again. And I said, of course, to the right person, I would love that. And I think I said something like, I don't really want to be a girlfriend. It's not really my speed, but I'd prefer to be a wife with the right man if it all works out in the right timing. And so, he sort of took that in, and we dated. Well, I should say now, this is the point when I was working with a rules coach. So this coach was referred to herself as like a strict rules coach. And so she had me doing some kind of bananas things, like, we waited. I did not sleep with him in round one of dating him. And we had dated for 3 months in round one. So in round two, about three months in, we did begin sleeping together. That was after he asked me to be exclusive. So then I felt more comfortable with that. And but I was working with this coach, and she would say things like, well, if you want to get married really quickly, just these are some of the things you need to do. And she had me like not spending any morning time with him if we had sex the night before, like jumping out of bed and saying I had to get on with my day, and absolutely no like morning connecting or any of that kind of stuff. There were a number of very strict things, which once I started following your work, I understood why they felt so off to me. They just didn't feel real. And I knew if I kept that up, it was not going to be good. And luckily I was in a Facebook group, and somebody mentioned your name and your work, and I found your podcast, and I just devoured every single episode. I listened to all of them, like back to back to back to back. And at that time, the 80/20 Wonder Club was probably just about to launch. So then, of course, I did join that at some point, but listened to all of your podcasts and decided, I really was going to need to have a call with you. I kind of looked at my calls with you as sort of clarity calls, because things were on the right track. I just wanted to see if there were some little tweaks, and kind of wanted to learn more about myself in this process. And so, yeah, you and I did have a call in the first year, and it basically just helped me with my mindset and all of that. But at the 1 year mark at dinner, he said to me, well, things are going really well. And, I'm thinking, now that we've been through the first year, that maybe the second year we get our families introduced to each other. And then, if things keep going well, then in the third year, we might be heading towards marriage, And so I kind of let him talk that through, and he had this particular vision. It was a little longer than my timeline, but I didn't say anything about that at the time, and I'm grateful I didn't. And I'm also grateful for our talk, because I think you helped me work on my mindset so that I could be more comfortable and more in my knowing that things were going to progress, so that he would feel safe to continue to progress things. And then sometime in year 2, he was talking about all of us going on a trip. He has two teenage daughters, and I have 2 teenage daughters, and they all get along pretty well. And so, but they hadn't spent really hardly any time together. I was sort of holding back on that. But he was talking about taking us all on a trip. And I said, that might be nice in the right timing. And, and he said, what is it that you want? And I wasn't expecting him to say that, but I started laughing. I said, well, this was probably in like maybe October of the second year, kind of towards the holidays. And I said, well, I'd love to be engaged by the holidays. And he laughed. And I realize now that probably I was trying to push things a little bit. And there was probably, from what I've learned from you, some of my unconscious programming, there was still some anxiousness there that kind of was getting impatient and wanting to move this forward. So we just continued on into the holidays. There was not a proposal. However, he did come to me after the holidays, maybe during, and he said, look, I know that you really wanted to be engaged at this time. And he said, I just have my certain timeline, and I want our families to get to know each other, and I want all of that to feel right so that we're really ready to go to the next step. And I relaxed into that, and I just said, I know that, you have a plan, and I totally respect that. And I just smiled at him. And so it felt good. And I think part of it was because Paula, just all of the mindset work that we did, and the I am affirmations, and I did use them quite a bit so that I could really be in that state of knowing that this was all going to unfold in good time. And what I learned too from one of our last calls was, just that the more I was in my knowing, the safer he felt, and that I was sort of like letting him be in the driver's seat. And that's really where he needed to be with this. And I just think he felt safe because I was happy and I wasn't pushing things. And then he was able to progress us further. So sometime after that, well, actually fast forward after that holiday season to the next one, right before Thanksgiving, he took me to his family property, and we were on a long, beautiful hike in the hills overlooking the property, and he literally got down on 2 knees in the dirt and pulled out this big, beautiful ring and proposed to me, overlooking his family vineyard. It was very special, very magical. Yeah, and then we planned the wedding to be just a few months after that, really. It was kind of a fast track. We wanted to get it done, and it was really an amazing proposal.
I love that proposal. What a lovely story. And the biggest thing I want everybody to hear from your story is that not everything has to be perfect. And we can actually make mistakes. And like you mentioned about things like, okay, it was Bumble, and maybe you were doing the rules stuff too heavily or whatever it was. But when we course correct, and don't beat ourselves up about it, and mostly don't bring it up to him, don't be talking about it, but simply course correct, everything can fall into place when you have the right mindset. Your case is so indicative of it, and what a great example. I really appreciate you telling me that. It feels wonderful, and I'm so, so happy for you.
Thank you. Yes, and I found that the mindset and the manifesting, continues to unfold in my marriage, of course, too. And I'm just so grateful that I always had that work to be kind of running in the background. And I definitely encourage women, obviously, to work on all three, the mindset, the mechanics of men, and the manifesting. But the mindset was just so helpful to me. But also I think the mechanic, too. I was really able to go back and understand men from working with you in a way that, and I had worked with at least 5 different dating coaches previously since my divorce. I just went through so much content and so many coaches, and I just did not understand men as well as I do now that I've discovered your work. It's really a profound difference, and it's something that I hope to teach my daughters who are coming up against that struggle, the 50-50 struggle, and just there's so much I want to impart to them as they get older and they can hear it. That men and women are equal, but we are not the same. And, I also was able to kind of deconstruct what happened with some of the men that I had dated post-divorce that I really cared for. But one of them was traveling, was only going to be in the city that I was in for a couple of months. And I understand now how that really, he was much more in a consumer mindset. Didn't matter how charming he was or what a good dater he was. And then the other man that I fell for, the separated man, he was not in a position to be a buyer. And he was a lovely man, but it just wasn't the right timing. And I could just see that for my now husband, he was a prospective buyer even when I met him the first time, but I knew it wasn't the right timing. And then many years later, everything about the way he guided our courtship was very clear he was a buyer. But yeah, having that knowledge from your book just really helped me understand better what happened in my dating life. And I so recommend your work to people just to really fast track the dating process. Whether you're dating for marriage, for your first marriage, or if you happen to be divorced, either way, your content is so valuable to really help women kind of be in a place where they're going to have a lot of clarity during the dating process about if this person is right for them, kind of the steps they need to take, what to keep an eye on, how to sort of manage your own mindset, your own emotions, all of it. All of it, Paula. It's so valuable.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate it. And what's interesting to me
And what I would love is if you can give me any insight as to what is different, because truth be told, other than Barbara DeAngelis and Toni Morrison, who might even be long gone now, I don't know, but would certainly be up there in years, I did not follow dating coaches. I did find the rules very interesting and then decided, okay, I'm going to go and be a coach. So I worked with Ellen Fine, Sherry Schneider briefly, and it was great, but I soon after veered in my own direction and never looked at any female dating coach or relationship coach's social media or information again. So it's been years now, and I don't really know what's out there and what the difference is. I just stay on my own path and kind of keep insulated from it. So since you did work with what could be looked at as many dating coaches, because many women keep floundering, I give you credit because you actually sought answers and you found yours. What would you say is the biggest difference in the content and what stood out to you?
Well, I love that question. I think that many dating coaches do have a sense of kind of broad sense of masculine and feminine energy, maybe some texting strategy, maybe sort of how to stay more in your feminine, and maybe a little bit on, self-awareness, kind of knowing yourself, knowing your triggers, not making assumptions about men, giving men the benefit of the doubt early in dating, things like that. So there are some threads from some of the coaches that I could maybe connect a little bit to your work. But these 3 tracks that you have and how deeply you go into each one of them, the mindset work, which is huge, the mechanics of men, which is a little different than a lot of coaches. I don't think they really understand some of the key pieces that are in your book, and the manifesting. I think, it's hard to say, like, kind of a combination of all of those things that I think makes your work so valuable. And I think different women, I've noticed in your podcast, maybe they need more to lean into one area more than another, or they might need different aspects at different times. But just at a minimum, understanding that men, don't respond to verbalization, that they respond to action, and that, men need to make a decision. Love alone is not enough for a man to marry a woman. Just these things are not taught by dating coaches. And I don't know how to get that out there. I am reminded that you had mentioned Bob Grant at a certain point. So I don't know in what ways you might identify that he influenced you, but certainly in terms of understanding men, I imagine he's got a thing or two to say about how men look at courtship and at relationships. But I feel like for the female dating coaches, there's not a deep understanding of the fundamental differences between men and women.
Thank you for bringing up Bob Grant, because I wasn't thinking of him in thinking of female dating coaches. And I don't know, because this was pre-2016 when I discovered his work, and he is a counselor. I'm not sure what the letters after his name are. He didn't have any big social media presence. I don't know if he does now, but his concepts, they so spoke to me that I knew I needed to expound on it for women. I believe he was a relationship coach, and he dealt maybe with couples, and he had his own therapy practice. But in terms of really encapsulating it for women, he didn't necessarily do that. Now, I don't know if he has, because again, I just don't look at anyone else's stuff because I don't want it to necessarily influence me. That could be both a good thing and a bad thing, I don't know. But I just don't do it, and I'm so busy doing my own work and coaching that I probably wouldn't have time to do it much anyway. But Bob's, beyond a nugget that I took away, it was so profound of how men commit and bond. That's what I built on. And then everything started to flow from that, and I built on it with my own things and the puppy principle and consumer versus buyer and all of that. But without that one understanding that men only bond through making a formal public commitment, I would not have been able to help as many women as I have. And certainly the book would have been very different, all of it. So it was very important. So I'm very, very glad you reminded me of that and brought him up because, yeah, he's an important part of this journey for me.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the takeaway for me is that you were taking many different facets from many people, which is always great. You put things together and you didn't wallow in any mistakes. You just started getting busy with the 3 prongs, your own mindset, your manifestation, and course correcting with mechanics. Like you did with the good example of you were told, don't stay in the morning, get out of there, and you realized, well, this is sending a real mixed message and not going to keep me necessarily in the Madonna category. That's another thing. Without Freud and Freud's Madonna whore, I mean, a lot of things come into play. Nobody has any of their own ideas in a vacuum necessarily. So, all of my previous work and life led me to the concepts and the way I encapsulate it in the 3 prongs. Manifestation, for example, law of assumption, a little bit of law of attraction, Neville Goddard. I mean, there's just so many things. It's not dating or relationship stuff, but absolutely influences hugely like Freud's Madonna whore.
Yes.
So that course correction really did you a great service. And now you're married. It sounds like you're happy. You've got your family going. This is really wonderful. And you can influence your own daughters. If they're heading into, I guess they are, what's after Gen Z?
Yes, they are maybe just probably the tail end of Gen Z.
Mm-hmm.
If not on to the next one. I'm not sure.
I think is it Gen Alpha or something like that?
I need to look that up. That sounds right.
So it's going to be tough for them, tougher than for any other generation heretofore. We don't know if the tides are going to go back a little bit. In certain circles, there's some indication that they could, but there's a lot out there that is extremely detrimental, especially to young women who might be more vulnerable, depending on their innate temperament and certainly their experiences, etc. But the way we are classifying males now and attempting to have them relate in a more female way, and then when they don't, impugn them for toxicity and so on and so forth is extremely detrimental. And social media, unfortunately, the way it is designed is for any quote-unquote expert or influencer in these spaces, the more they skew something as negative, toxic, the red flags, everything negative, the more eyes on it they get, the more accolades they get for it, and the more money they make for it. And it keeps building on itself, and it's incredibly negative. And quite frankly, it's very worrisome because it's come to my attention now that it's not only that young women are doing this with their love interests, they're also doing it with other men in their life. There's a big movement, for example, parental alienation is very big in the Gen Z community because Gen Z is very much about personal growth, mental health, and anything that challenges their ideas, what they want to do, mental health, growth, etc., is sometimes deemed toxic, but to a large degree is simply put as it's okay to expunge from your life. So they tend to group men, whether it be father, boss, boyfriend, anything that challenges them as narcissism or toxic masculinity or on a scale thereof. And I was listening to an expert the other day that gone are the days where you honor the family or mom and dad, even if you had anything less than an ideal experienced childhood, anything about it. And that's very worrisome to me. And I hope that this is a generational thing that will turn. But hearing that young women are more than ever turning away from religion, mostly because it is seen as holding you back, keeping you from being free, and not getting what you want in your life, I think is very concerning. And to me, it's quite sad.
I hear you, and I am sad about it too. And there's a part of me that hopes that the pendulum will swing back. I know that at one point I was considering being a dating coach. I think I might have shared that with you. And I did have a chance to meet some women in their early 30s who were very frustrated with their dating life and were certain that there must be a different way. Because fundamentally they still wanted to have families, they still wanted to have a man in their life. There was still something very deep within them that there was a lack there was something missing. And so they were turning for help in the midst of some of this chaos that you've described that is sort of bubbling up, this confusion and chaos. And especially I think as women get, because of our biological clocks, as we get into our 30s, mid-30s even, there's this feeling like, wow, I want something more, and I don't know how to get there because everything around me is not supportive of me finding my person. So I guess that's the optimist in me. I like to think that there's some hope. And I'm even heartened by my daughter who having some struggles with her boyfriend. It was a long-distance boyfriend. They ended up breaking up. And during that turbulent time of, her first love winding down and ending, I did talk to her a little bit about attachment styles and, how that can affect our primary love relationships and some of the things that you talk about. And she was open to it. Actually, both my daughters are interested in attachment theory and just where they fall on the spectrum. And I did talk to her about affirmations at bedtime. And I thought, for sure, like she was just going to be like, yeah, right, Mom, okay. But I mentioned it to her. And then fast forward a few months later, it came up again. And she said, oh, yeah, I listen to the I am affirmations all the time now. And even my friends are listening to it, Mom.
That's great.
Yeah, I was touched by that.
So wonderful to hear. I like that so much. I want to have hope too, because I think everything tends to swing back and we find the middle ground. This is just a very unique time, and certainly it's going to get even what we might deem as a bit stranger with AI and how quickly that's going to be a go-to for people in this space when they want answers to relationship questions. And I have a client who was telling me how she was using AI, probably ChatGPT, for when she got frustrated with her boyfriend and wanted an answer to questions. And this is such an important component of it since we're on the topic. So she would say to her AI buddy, this is what's going on, this is what he's doing. I want to send him a text about this or that, or what should I answer? And she said, I was getting all kinds of answers that they were very well crafted. But I knew enough that if I were to send them, it's going to escalate things and not going to be helpful. She said, what I learned to do then is to qualify the question before asking it. So I would say, I'm going to ask you about this text that I'm upset about, and I want to give him an answer. But I want to be clear, I'm not interested in breaking up. She said it changed everything, the answers she gets. Because in not qualifying it, AI has no discernment where you want to go, so it's simply seen as a complaint, and And if there's a complaint, then we want to get our point across and we want it to be fixed in our favor. Well, that's an extremely black and white, robotic way to look at it without context. So this is a very important delineation that needs to be made. And fortunately, because we are working together, she made this determination of doing it this way and not just going with her feeling and using verbiage that would simply escalate it.
Yeah, I think that example is really helpful and illustrative of the problem with AI, and I hadn't thought about it in that way until you described it that way. I hope you do something on this on YouTube, because I think if you haven't already in one of your YouTube talks, this would be a fascinating topic. But I do think that AI is likely also pulling from a lot of content on the internet that's around more of a therapeutic model, like, oh, you should tell your partner everything, you should talk about everything, you should get your feelings out, all of that stuff is so readily available on the internet, and it's just so entrenched. And I know that's something that you speak to. Not that therapy is necessarily a bad thing. I think you've always made it clear that there is a place for therapy for people at certain times in their life or for certain issues. But if you're using AI to answer basic dating questions, relating, communicating with men, you're going to get a lot of this therapy speak, I'm afraid.
That is such a good point. Because yes, where is the AI pulling from to get the answers it's giving? And that's exactly it. And it's why I'm giving kind of an antidote, if you will, to it, that it is my belief we have the tools with us when we do things according to my three-pronged approach. We don't have to get into the place of being the man's therapist, nor do we have to be in therapy with him. And I think that's important. Unfortunately, I think there is a lot out there that, especially with millennials, Gen Z, etc., that if you are not in therapy, you are probably not on your way to being self-actualized. And you really haven't become self-aware, kind of along those lines. I mean, it can skew one way or the other, but there's a general feeling that that's the case. And I see young women who generally seek out therapy more than young men, generalization, but the statistics bear that out. But if their man is not also seeking therapy, then he's just not going to connect with them in the same way. And he's going to know himself enough to be in a relationship that's going to be as connected and as open, etc. And I also think that to a great degree, therapy is a female way of relating that men do not solve their issues with in the same way at all. In other words, women talk to work things out for themselves. They talk with other women to figure things out, sometimes come to a consensus, sometimes problem solve, etc. But men do not do that in the same way, and I believe it's not a great thing to put them in the position of needing to do that in order to be grown, to be mentally well, because it's feminizing them in a way that takes away some of their agency, and I don't think it's necessary.
This is so true, and I can think of two personal examples. I went to couples counseling with my now ex-husband, and it was just a miserable experience for both of us. But I couldn't understand at the time why, because I thought, well, we're working on everything. Why wouldn't this be a good thing? Mm-hmm. And my husband was just, at the time, was just miserable. And it's funny because he and I were on text recently discussing something about our daughters, and he said, well, let's use one of the tools that our marriage counselor recommended, to solve this problem. And at that point in text, I just said, I am just so terribly sorry that I put you through any of that to begin with. It was really not yeah. And it was funny, Paula. He was very responsive to that, actually. I mean, he said, well, it's all in the past now, but I could feel a bit of a shift in him when I acknowledged that really wasn't a good road, a good path for us to go down in the course of our marriage. And it very much was led up to us going through our divorce, and I do think that was actually a big piece of it. And then my current husband, he also went to marriage counseling with his previous wife. Again, same thing. He speaks about it as being really not helpful for him, although he did work with a coach at one point and found the coaching more helpful for him because it wasn't that same model of going back into the story, connecting, communicating like women like to do, but it was more just working on different aspects of himself that he wanted to improve and more, improve in his own life.
Mm-hmm. And I think that men are receptive to more of a coaching model. It's action-oriented.
Yes.
Therein lies the difference, what I talk about all the time. Women relate through verbalization, men relate via action, and when they have a plan and they can execute the plan, that feels good. Just talking about something, it's tantamount to, I'm gonna put you in a car and not tell you where we're going. But yet, on the way, you're going to have to figure out the reason even why we're going on the journey in the first place. It's so confounding and confusing to men that most would rather do anything other than be put in a room, typically with another woman, sometimes a man counselor, shut the door, and not know what's coming his way. It's simply not male for the most part.
I hope that's really helpful for your listeners because I find that very helpful to look at it in that way. I'm remembering that the therapist and I, with my first husband, we spent a lot of time trying to decide if my husband was a narcissist. And as you know, this term bubbles up all the time now, and it is misused, terribly misused, I think. Mm-hmm. But he certainly was on a spectrum, as you've talked about a lot. He was on a spectrum and maybe had a little bit more of that going for him, and he's more of a public figure, liked to be out in public a lot, had a million friends, so he's on that spectrum, which some people might perceive as, more narcissistic, but certainly he was not a narcissist, and he's a very, very good father, a very great friend, a contributor to society, but in the therapy sessions, we were trying to put him in a box.
Right, that happens too. And we can never escape the time in which we are born and then of a certain age. For example, if you and I were somehow having this conversation 100 years ago, well, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It would be exceedingly different. And each generation along the way has different ideas, and unfortunately, we tend to eschew whatever came before us in a way as simply outdated, no longer useful, just completely outdated. And I always go back to the fundamentals of the male and female brain, and that we have been on this earth as the human animal we started out mostly as being, and we're not going to typically in any one person's lifetime, even someone your daughter's ages now, change fundamentally the male being. And dare I say, nor should we. It's what gives us the spice in life, in a way, the yin and yang, the sun and rain, the night and day. And I think we don't want to, again, impugn men for being men. Not everything about being male is negative at all. Not everything about being female is positive. Everything just is, and every trait and
every being has both positive and negative. I hope that this trend can be staved off of women not taking some responsibility for their love relationships, a la, if he doesn't attend to my attachment style, he doesn't connect with me in a way that I need, he can be brusque or whatever it is, we just get him out of our life. That seems to be a trend that I think is hurting women. And then we put in all of the social things that are going on now that you've likely heard me talk about, but the real statistics, the Pew Research out there, 64% of college grads are now female, and women date across the spectrum and up. So they are looking for their equal or greater educationally, socially, and financially, and they are going to find it harder and harder to find that, especially a la, which you know I've talked about, height. Only 2.2% of men in the world are 6 feet or over. Not great odds at all. The statistic of you want to find a man across the age spectrum, 6 feet or above, who makes $250,000 a year, that statistic alone should be shocking enough to shock women into, if I want to have a baby, marriage, and family, I've got to make some adjustments. The statistic is, if you haven't heard me talk about it, anybody listening to this, 6 feet or more, $250,000 or more a year is 0.01%. If you take it down to 100,000 and you want him to be 6 feet or more and make 100,000 or more a year, it is 3% of the male population. That's 18 to 80. That also doesn't account for gay men.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's funny because depending where you live, if you really take a look when you're walking around, and this is important for anybody listening who's wanting only a tall man, unless you live in a city with a lot of NBA players or something, I don't know, but walk around, you do not see as many men. In your awareness, because you're attracted to that, you're going to see the few that are. But we have to go with what statistically is the case if we want happiness. And then there's the other side of the spectrum. When we survey people in long-term, over 30-year happy marriages, way down on the scale is looks and height. It is not a big factor in long-term happy marriages.
That's something that I am so grateful that I tapped into with my now husband. I mean, he's just a hair taller than me, but he takes care of himself, and he wants to provide for me and my daughters, and he's just very kind to my parents and is planning for our retirement, and, you know, is just really leading in a way that feels right to me, and but also with my input, and he values my input, and he's not 6'3". So yeah, I really appreciate that you've been spending time talking to your viewers on YouTube in particular about this, because this is hugely important. And men that are in a different income bracket, you know, than we might typically want to explore. That's important for women to look at, because women bring some of their own income now. And so you still will likely be able to connect very well with a man who maybe he's a business owner, or he just does something that's not, you know, in that typical has a law degree or this or that, medical this or that, you know, but he's still maybe maybe not the perfect dater, but maybe an excellent partner, an excellent husband. And I want to encourage my daughters to keep an open mind there too.
I love that. Yeah, the more we can get it out there, I think is important, because the flip side is that social media is showing that, oh no, you can have it all. And I think that you can have certainly a lot, and I think you can actually have anything you want, but I don't think you can have everything you want.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's the picking things that are most important to you. And there are some women that no matter what, even if they're only 5'4" themselves, they cannot be with someone under 6 feet. It's just something they cannot do. And
And I encourage a woman to, even if she is like that and says, there's just no way, no how I can be with someone under 6 feet. If he's taller than she is, to sample just going out with him if there are other things that she likes. His humor, his intelligence, he's got a great job, he has other attributes she really likes. Because I liken it to some kind of foreign food that maybe you've never sampled. And like some people would say, like in Middle America, maybe they have not tried sushi. And they say, oh, I would never eat raw fish. Well, if you get them to open themselves up to it and they go and they try it, well, suddenly they're liking sushi. And you hope that it can be like that for women, because there are so many good men out there who would like what the woman likes and want to give her marriage and children, especially with online dating now, where the stats are showing that with online dating, 10% of the men online get 90% of the interactions with women. The other 90% of men get hardly anything.
That's a tragedy. I mean,
it is.
I think about my husband also when we were dating. I didn't always love the way he dressed, but I remembered that you would say, you could always work on that later. You can't change a person fundamentally, but you can certainly influence some of the smaller things that women tend to be very critical of in early dating. It's almost like it's in our biology to be looking very carefully, extra carefully at the man, whereas the man's like, to your point, loves all puppies, and is open to dating lots of different women. That's not the case for women. But if we know this on a conscious level, that we have this tendency to be hyper, particular about the men we're dating, I think this can help soften it a little bit. Just having that conscious awareness and being open to it, as you said, like sampling different foods than you might usually sample.
I completely agree. And for any woman that is having a hard time, it might be helpful to read Logan Urey's book, which I think came out in 2024, maybe 23, but I think 2024. She is a dating and relationship coach, albeit for very high-end clients, because she is an advisor to Hinge. She's Harvard educated, wrote the book, How to Not Die Alone, the surprising science that will help you find love. For any woman in her 20s or 30s who is struggling with online dating, I recommend reading that book, because you may need a wake-up call, and you need to get the wake-up call quickly if you're looking to marry and have children. Because the inconvenient truth is that women can get pregnant as long as they're menstruating, pretty much. But after a certain age, it is very difficult for them to keep pregnancies. And then the older we are and the older the eggs are, we can be taking very big chances with pregnancies. But more importantly, while you can have a baby in your 40s, and I have 2 examples of my own life. One of my former bosses, she had her first at 48, and I just had a friend who had her first at 53.
Wow.
Yes, pretty amazing. However, men, unfortunately, like with everything else, don't see things the way we see them in terms of love and commitment. When a man knows that he wants to marry and have children, he actually goes looking for it in a way that women are always open to it because of the way we love and bond through time and sex. In other words, a man, if he is not ready due to the criteria I outline in the book, meaning his finances are not in order, he isn't ready to settle down, he wants to be doing certain things with his career, his advocation, he doesn't want the responsibility. He dates and can date and have serial, even monogamy and long-term relationships
with no thought of, quote unquote, adopting his pretty puppy. He just keeps dating. And statistics show, and they did a huge study with like 20,000 people, what women date for and what men date for. Women date to find long-term love and romantic partners, generally speaking. Men date for one reason and one reason only, and that is for the shot at short-term sexual encounters. That's why men date. And like us, we love all puppies. And it is not until we are ready to adopt according to other criteria, which has nothing to do with loving puppies, not one thing to do with it. When we are ready to take on the responsibility of adopting, we set out, find the shelter or the breeder or whatever it is, and we then get our puppy. And then we commit to it. And that's it. And this is how men do that with us to a great degree. And the problem is, just like with us, and this is harsh, but it's an inconvenient truth that's very important for women to know if they want children. As women, if you are going to adopt a puppy because you want that puppy to have puppies, in other words, you're going to breed that puppy, you are going to go out and get a puppy, a real puppy. Not older than, say, in puppy years, 2 years old. You're not going to get an 8-year-old because you love them all. And the 8-year-old, while wonderful and you love it to death, you're going to go and get a 1-year-old or 2-year-old to breed puppies with. This is the harsh, inconvenient truth for men, and certainly anecdotally, I have asked men to be very honest with me, men in their 40s, and they have been, and if they are ready, and when they are ready to settle down and have a baby, they only look below 35.
Wow.
Right? It is a wow. Let's face it. A woman who is between 35 and 40, I think, is probably the most beautiful and sexy of her life. Pretty much between 35 and 45 for the most part. She's now no longer a girl. She's a woman, and generally her most beautiful and sexy. So it's not that he's not attracted. It's not that he wouldn't be able to fall in love, but he's going out hunting for a specific reason, and it's gonna be under 35. Now, does it happen that he will allow himself and fall in love and start a family older? Absolutely. Of course it does. But I like to give women a little bit of a jolt and even a little bit of teeny tiny fear, because in my practice, I have so many women coming to me between 40 and 47 who are looking to find their man right now, marry, and have a baby.
Wow, that's just really understandable that women find themselves oftentimes in that place. It's very sobering, and it makes me think about how I want to talk to my daughters about this as they build their lives and plan things.
Yes. I was, if you want to look at it, fortunate or unfortunate. I never wanted to have children, so it was never an issue for me. I can't imagine that kind of pressure in terms of time, and my heart goes out to women. And I have helped women get exactly what we're talking about. For example, think of one woman who came to me, I think she was exactly 40, and she had just broken up with someone, and she said, I think the ship has sailed for me to find someone to marry and have a baby, but that's ultimately what I would like. And she said, I followed your work. I'll do anything you say, except I won't do online dating. And I said, okay, I'm going to tell you, you got to online date. She said, okay, but I'll do anything, but I won't go on Tinder. And I said, and I'm going to tell you to go on Tinder. This was a few years back. And she said, oh no, how can that be? It's a hookup site, blah, blah, blah. I said, no, it's not a hookup site. It's how you show yourself on the site and how you conduct yourself during the course of the steps and the meeting and the dating, etc. So, bless her, she said, all right, because you say it, I'll do it. She was engaged in 5 months. And fast forward years now, she has one child, if not another, and exceedingly happy. So happy for her. And there are women absolutely who do get that at 40 years old or older. No question about it. I just like to deal in probability more than just possibility, because I want any woman who wants to have children to have that chance in her life. In a marriage, yes, it can happen outside of marriage, but it is not only exceedingly hard to do under the best of circumstances. I don't believe, and this is just a personal thing, that it is best for children. And statistics bear that out as well. Children, no matter what, seem to be better adjusted in two-parent households. Again, that's not me saying it. That's what statistics are bearing out. Now, again, I'm sure you can go and find skewed statistics otherwise, but I believe it to be the case because, generally speaking, if we follow what is quote-unquote norm for nature, we can generally extrapolate what's going to be best for us as the human animals we are as well. Very few mammals don't have the workings of like the male and female in some capacity working together for the good of the young. And the higher up you go on the scale, I think the more important it is. And women are never more vulnerable as they are when pregnant. And I just believe that the yin and the yang of everything is necessary. And whenever possible, at least starting out, it may not last, but at least starting out, we try to have the best possible scenario, and that's two-parent.
Agree.
So yeah, if you can, in any way, I don't even know how it's possible now because our society is so focused on you grow up, you go to college, after college, you get your job, and from there it's supposed to just happen that you find the right partner. And years ago, there was a great book, but she got vilified for writing this book, and she was Ivy League educated, I think a CEO herself, or had some very big position. And she wrote a book advocating for women to find their partner in college because that was the time in her life where she would have access to more males than she will ever have in her life, typically, of her ilk and educational level. Meaning that after college, everything gets diffused. And depending on what occupation you go into, you may or may not ever again have that kind of access.
Paula, this is fascinating because I raised my daughters in a really wealthy community. And one thing I thought about a lot when I was there was that all of the women, all of the couples that I saw that were doing quite well in their marriages, and their kids were doing really well, and their marriages seemed to be thriving, as far as I could tell. All of these women had met their husbands in college, affluent community. Mm-hmm. And I was astounded, and that did not happen to me. I was at an art school. There were lots of gay men around me. For what I didn't even date in college, probably because of my programming. And to exactly your point, afterwards, it's like I woke up from a dream and I looked around and I was like, where are the men? And at that time, there weren't any dating, not really dating apps or any of that stuff. So you would just encounter men here and there in your life. And ironically, I ended up marrying a man that I met in college that we bumped into each other 10 years later.
Wow.
On a whim, yeah. And so, but this is so profound, and I think it's so true. It's just, it makes so much sense that you would want to think about that while you're in college, and it's hard for women to be in that mental place. But I don't see any reason why we can't have these conversations with younger women, and also for them to think a little bit about their career in terms of if they want to make a little tiny bit of space for maybe staying home for some period of time, or however they decide to work it out. The career you choose plays a big role in like the timing of when you would have a child too, and how much space you have in your life. And I know that's probably controversial as well, but these are all things that I really wish young people would be open to thinking about.
I totally agree. What I find really fascinating is that most stuff is actually, in this realm anyway, ass backwards. What I mean by that is that even under the realm of relationships and career, children, it would work so much better for most people if we did things a different way. And I know this is going to be radical and fly in the face of everything, but I just want to say it because this is my opportunity too. So thanks, Robin. For example, if it were the norm that people go to college and in college they find their mate, they get married either towards the end of college or right after college, and they set about making their life together, meaning struggling a bit together. And if they want children, to do it early on. And the woman not necessarily do anything towards what she ultimately may want to do. Because for the first 10 or 15 years, to actually be a mom.
What a concept, Paula.
Right? And here's why I think it would work exceedingly well for industry. What can happen, and I know this is something we guard against in the corporate world or in any industry whatsoever, but it's out there, is you have a choice between a 35-year-old man for the job who's single and a 35-year-old woman for the job who is single. The underlying question is she gonna stop out at some point? I'm investing in her in this position, and she's gonna stop out to have her children. That's one thing. That is it correct? Is it, against the law, etc.? Yes, but is it happening? Absolutely. And it happens anywhere for a 27-year-old woman to a 35 and a 37-year-old woman. Here's the other thing. We only give in the United States a very short window for parental leave. And the worst possible thing we can do for children is for them to not be with mom 24/7 with very little change in that. Minimally for 2 to 3 years for the adjustment of the child. We talk about that all the time here, the subconscious programming.
Yep.
Only people in the poorest of nations, tribal communities, rear children in a way that while they're poor, they're happier because they don't have anxious attachment, because they've been reared in the right way. We are rearing children like the wire monkey that we all learned about in Psych 101 in college. Wouldn't it be so much better that mom and dad start out working together and make something together which helps bond people, bond that couple, have the mom. Now she's educated. Maybe she can even homeschool. I don't know. But she's not necessarily in the workforce. Immediately has children. Stays home until. And then when she starts her career, she can say to those employers, oh no, I've had my children. I'm ready to, start my life and commit myself to this industry, whatever it is. We're doing it in a way that doesn't serve us on so many levels, but most importantly, on the psyche of the children.
This is such an important topic, and it ties in so well to all of your coaching around the subconscious programming that we all pick up between birth and age 7. It ties into the importance of a parent being home with their child for some period of time. And there are some people on social media that are speaking to this, and I hope to hear you speak to it a little bit more too, because things on social media tend to get amplified. And I think it's an important conversation for younger people to be having, even if they don't agree with it.
That's the thing. It's a really hard sell, because we've been pushing adulthood out farther and farther and farther. In certainly my grandparents' time, and even in my parents' time, by the time you are 18, you're an adult thinking of doing adult things. Now, 18 is looked at as a child, and until you are 28, you're not really even looked at as, okay, what are you doing in your adult life? We keep pushing it out farther and farther. Who does this serve? Certainly not women, and certainly not children. As always, we're all about, in society, protect women and children, do what's good for women and children. No, we're not doing what is best for children at all. This is inconvenient because women, certainly I'm a product of that, but I was lucky because I didn't want to have kids. It must be so much harder if you do, but I didn't think of it at all in my 20s because I didn't have to. But like with everything else, there's that old saying, people who have children and people who don't feel equally sorry for one another. I got that freedom, but then there's a part that people who have children will say, but isn't that sad? She missed out on this amazing thing in life. And perhaps that's true. I will never know. I just want women to get what they want in a fashion that makes it workable, doable. And I am deeply saddened by the new way it's looked at now, which is even different from when I was in my 20s, certainly early 30s. The man did not need to be fully hooked, have his career all set in front of him, and be financially set in order to marry and take on a wife. You did it together. You built something together. And that seems to be going by the wayside. Women seem to want the man to be all ready to have everything, and it's leaving men in their 20s, certainly some in their 30s, and late bloomers not to have a chance. And they can be really good men. I just like to see it change a bit, and I would like to see people doing it younger, because actually life is long. They say it's short, but we have plenty of time. Kids are only young for a very short window. And if mom could be with children minimally until school, that's not that many years, even if you have 2 or 3. And then when she goes into the workforce, she's free to do it in a way that she doesn't have to stop out for any amount of time, nor does she have to feel the guilt of, okay, I only have 6 weeks with baby till I have to go back to work.
I see that all the time.
Yeah, right? I think it's just awful.
I was lucky enough to be able to stay home with both my daughters until they were in middle school and high school. And I felt very lucky to have that opportunity. It made it, I think there was a longer gap, and so getting back into my career was a little bit trickier, but I'm back in it now. And as you said, that time goes so quickly.
Doesn't it? And aren't you glad you were able to do that?
I feel so lucky that I had that opportunity, and one of the reasons why I'm grateful to my ex-husband that between the two of us, we could make that work.
Yeah. And it is now a luxury. And that's what I'm concerned about for our society. It needs to be, again, more the norm. And I'm hoping that the pendulum will swing back. And that's why I would like to see the movement of people being young. And so many would say, oh my gosh, if you marry at 24, the chance of you being divorced is going to go way up. Well, there is some evidence that the younger you marry, the greater chance of divorce, but it's still hovering at first marriages no matter what at 50%. So what I'm feeling for women in what I do for women is that right now most women will have a series of monogamous relationships, and even some that she thinks maybe are monogamous, but on his end they're not. There are so many women coming to me in situationships, not even relationships, and women can get attached, do get attached, and stay in uncommitted, amorphous sexual relationships for years without a man committing. So I say, if no matter when you are with a man, whether he's 22 or older, if he wants to marry and you have any feeling about it and him that's positive, why not do it and rise to that challenge for yourself? Because he, as the man, will be the best in marriage.
that he can be. In other words, men, like we talked about with Bob Grant earlier on in this discussion, that they do not bond through time and sex. They bond through making the formal public commitment. So he's going to be more bonded and best in marriage. And certainly you want to attempt to go the distance, but you will have a better chance and a better relationship possibly once that man is in marriage. You may want to think of it as, okay, am I just going to keep giving myself to these relationships where I don't get anything with it? I'd like to see more younger marriages that potentially could go the distance. And especially if women could think about having children younger and then dependent upon their vocation getting into the workforce later, if it's at all doable financially. I mean, there's some careers, I mean, if you're you're a professional ballet dancer, yep, you're going to have your profession, at 28, you're going to have to pick a new one anyway if you're not going to be a teacher. But those are so few and far between. There's nothing that more maturity in the workforce will typically not be looked at as beneficial.
I totally agree, and I do have these conversations with my daughters. I let them know, keep an open mind. I also think they should keep an open mind about what type of career they pick and how much flexibility and in and out, opportunities there would be for that career choice. And I also think often about the divorce rate that you often mention in your work. And I do think that if more younger women were aware of the mechanics of men and they were aware of their own programming, I think marriages would last a lot longer, if not be sustained for a lifetime.
Yeah, I agree. And I hope that's the case. And we are at a very interesting time whereby they say in the next 20 years, the amount of careers that will be wiped out and jobs that will be absolutely wiped out by AI is astounding. For example, one lawyer was talking about it, and he owns his own law firm. I was watching a video of him talking about it because it is going to economically change everything for us. Robots will be doing most jobs that we have now, and ones that we would not even think could ever be done by them heretofore. But he was just, this lawyer, talking about it in a very simple way that's still shocking. Like they say, shocks the conscience of the court. He said that he had a firm and he had lots of young lawyers under him. Now he has none. He uses AI completely. And he said, here's the situation. I need a brief done. I can ask my AI to do the brief exactly as I want it. It is done in 3 to 6 minutes. I take the time to review it, which I would have to anyway if it were a lawyer under me. I review it. I say, make these changes, make the next changes. No matter how many changes I want, no matter how small I want them, there is no pushback. There is no attitude. There is not one problem ever. I get it done faster, and talk about less expensive. Oh my gosh. I don't have to pay, all the incurred costs of bringing on, even if it's a consultant type of lawyer. Everything is done, and I don't use any anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, that's now in 2025. By 2035, it will be so far in front of us. Doctors, everyone that we think of, that we go to for expert, we will not need half of who we have. Only few who will be guiding AI, which, if you don't know or you haven't heard about this, Mo Gaudat talks about it a lot. He was a Google X executive. He's written the book 1 Billion Happy and Scary Smart. He discusses this. And this segues into what we're talking about today, because males will be very impacted by this, because we have brought ourselves up and socialized ourselves that a man is what he does. This is going to fundamentally change. Universal basic income is coming because everything, for the most part, as somebody like Elon Musk, no matter what you think of him, he said almost everything we have now now can be replaced with AI and humanoid robots. And we're not even getting into the whole sexual thing where you can just order up as a male your sexual robot with exactly the look and her becoming whatever you want her to be as the male. Really scary stuff. So if you're interested at all, Scary Smart, be a great book to read for anybody. But this is coming, and it's going to change everything socially as well. But I'm hoping that I get to see in my lifetime whereby kids still go to college to have the experience to expand themselves in knowledge and socially find their mates there and couple up and start their lives early, especially related to children. Women then get what they want. Men are best when they're around women. There's nothing as dangerous, as they say, as a male 17 to 37 with no woman in his life, no sex in his life, and no prospects. That's a dangerous. They are the ones, and only a few percentage of them, like 5% of them, wreak havoc on the planet. But it's mostly them. And if they get away with it and keep doing it, then as they get older, they continue down that road. If they're not caught and jailed before it or whatever it is, or killed, what have you. But it's really important that as AI takes the place of humans in our lives, we become more humanistic and have better communities and certainly couple up and have partnership for our mental well-being.
Yes.
So thank you for letting me, I didn't expect it to go this way. I love this conversation and I really appreciate that. I don't necessarily get to say these things that often. And so it's really nice to have that conversation with a mom of young women who are coming into this space, coming up here in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes, Paula, I didn't expect it to go this way either. And I'm actually thrilled that it did, because it's always in the back of my mind what I need to be thinking about to guide my daughters and support them. And you brought it up from the very beginning of the call, what challenging times this is for young women and young men. And I really appreciate the conversation quite a bit.
Thank you. And I know you had a question that we didn't get to, and I want to get to it. You had a question about something related to you doing stuff around the house and like different ways of looking at it. I'm happy to answer that if you'd like to.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm always curious about, how to implement Sexy Mother, and I feel like you've given lots of good examples in different podcasts. But my husband has a plan to change this in the house and upgrade this in the house, and he built a bedroom for my daughter to make room for her in the house, and I'm hugely appreciative of everything he's done to accommodate me moving in with him, well, all of us moving in with him. But still, I'm a girl, and I would like to do some more decorating. I took your advice and tried to get the bulk of furniture purchased before I moved in with him. And you had mentioned that to me on a call to get that done in advance. And we did execute on that, but there's still quite a bit that I would like to see happen. But he's always pushing ahead with his different projects that he wants to do around the house that are just for a woman, not as much fun, more nuts and bolts and less decorating, I guess. So I just love to hear your take on that. And also just lumping in with that, I would love to retire in the next 2 years. And we've had many conversations about it. And he may take a little longer to retire. He's a little younger than me. But I think financially we could pull it off. But sometimes I don't really know how to talk about it with him, that I would love to do it in the next, sooner rather than later.
I guess it's always helpful to come at it from the vantage point of knowing what might be his objections before you go into the conversation, because that'll help you to direct it or to say things like, I'm guessing or I'm surmising that you aren't wanting to retire until X because blah, blah, blah. And it's a way to do it that elicits generally the truth. You can even do it in a way whereby you know that you're saying an untruth. For example, say you know that he is concerned about
the money in some way, but yet it's not really rational to you because you think, well, it's not really going to make any difference the 2 years and it's X amount of dollars and blah, blah, blah. So instead of saying the truth, you say something that really isn't. This is a little way of doing it that elicits the truth because people tend to do this. They correct us. So if I say to you, well, I know you hate the color green. If I know or I'm fishing for your take on it, you'll correct me. You'll immediately, I don't hate the color green. No, I actually love it. You'll immediately correct me. People just tend to do that. So we can use this in a way like with this situation, well, I know you don't want to retire because you're concerned that X amount of money is not enough. And you know that's a lie. He's going to correct you. Oh no, it's plenty. I want blah, blah, blah. And then he'll tell you what the real deal is. You can maybe get it that way. Does that make sense?
Yes, that totally makes sense. And I think he has an idea that my contribution, is buying him a little bit of time. The fact that I'm working, I could frame it in that way, but in the opposite way, like you said. So I'll have to think that through, and I think that could definitely get him to open up more and see that maybe his concerns are not even really anything to really. He'll be able to make his own case for us retiring, but I'll let him do it. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah. It does take some thought because you kind of have to think of it backwards. You have to think, okay, what is it really, or what do I think it really is? The way to test it best, if I want to get confirmation, is to say the opposite, and then I'll likely get confirmation. But if I don't, then I'm going to find out something else, and then I got to pivot from there.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with the decorating. So you can also use this kind of reverse psychology, something like,
wondering what approach I'm going to give Robin to help her get the decorating done with the budget that will make her happiest? In the few minutes we have left in this episode, I outline a sexy mother tip that Robin can use to help ensure that she makes the home she shares with Jack the happiest and healthiest it can be. And because I want you to get what you desire and deserve in your romantic life, I invite you to check out the 80/20 Wonder Club, where you can hear the rest of this episode with Robin and so much more. The 80/20 Wonder Club is an exclusive membership-only club of the Make Him Wonder podcast, where you'll get over 200 ad-free episodes categorized by age and relationship status, plus all new episodes the moment they're formatted and ready to be aired. Unfiltered coaching conversations like this one, with all my advice and principles to have you succeeding in your romantic life. The 80/20 Wonder Club includes my Making Magic with Men Mindset Manual, a video series of mindset and mechanics practices for you to do at your own pace. Join monthly and cancel at any time, or save by committing to a 6 or 12-month membership. And not only will you save by committing to more, you'll receive a full coaching intensive experience where you'll be talking to me in a conversation like you just heard. You choose the date, anytime during your 12 months, and you'll be talking to me in one of my program calls, so you can experience what it is like to work with me. And with any membership, you get access to being on an audio-only anonymous talk with me on one of my YouTube lives. There are so many options for talking to me, so you can more easily create the relationship of your dreams and level up to the complete commitment you totally deserve. Check it out at THE8020WONDER.CLUB and join us, as that is the only way you'll be able to hear the rest of this episode and all the full ad-free episodes of Make Him Wonder. Don't miss out on how to make your man wonder in the right way to have the divine right results in your relationship, how to maintain the right mindset, and how to manifest a Mr. Right who does right by you. Go now to the 8020wonder.club. That's THE8020WONDER.CLUB. You and your love will be glad you did.